Okay, first thing, tell us your name and what it is that you do here.
My name is Todd Willard, and I'm an assistant Commonwealth attorney in Fayette County.
And what led you into law? What led you into this, your role as a prosecutor?
Initially, after graduating from law school, I started out doing civil law, primarily representing insurance companies, and then eventually specializing in medical malpractice defense. I did that for a little over 15 years and just became kind of monotonous and didn't want to do it anymore. Wasn't sure if I wanted to practice law anymore, but I had a friend who was on the police force, Lieutenant Brotherton, and I missed being in the courtroom, so he suggested I speak with Luana, and that's how I ended up getting hired.
All right, and so what kind of, what sort of led you into working child abuse cases? Was there something, you start working with the prosecutor's office, is there something that sort of led you in that direction?
Luana, she of course is really involved in the Child Advocacy Center and always has been for several years, and she thought with my experience with medical background in law that I would be good for child cases, because obviously there's a lot of medical evaluations and forensic interviews that they do. I really didn't know what to expect when I first started, but I'm really glad that Luana chose me for that because I'm very passionate about it.
Well, it's certainly something that not just anyone could do. There are many challenges to it. It's got to be tough mentally, emotionally. So what are the biggest challenges of working these cases?
I think the biggest challenge for a case that has a child victim in Kentucky, the Child Advocacy Center does a great job of doing a forensic interview, and that's recorded. However, we can't use that in court. The child has to actually testify in person. And of course, the defendant is going to be present, so they have to be in the same room with the perpetrator. And that's really tough to make a child do. And it's something that we have to consider when we're talking about either trying to plea bargain or go to trial. How much pressure do we want to put on the child to testify? Because it is a lot of pressure. So we have some victims who really, really want to testify, and then we have others that don't. So we take that into account, and then we also work with their caregivers or parents to try to make that decision of, is it going to be best to have them testify? Because that can be cathartic as well. Or is this something that we want to try to resolve, get a fair result, but not put the child through that and not to re-victimize them?
This may be a similar answer, but what does the Commonwealth seek to accomplish in prosecuting child sex offenders?
We take into account what the child wants to do. Secondly, we want to hold the perpetrator, the offender, accountable for what they did. They should be accountable for and responsible for the what they've done to the victim. And then also public safety. We want to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So a lot of times when we're making the decision about how do we want the case to resolve, fortunately we have the sexual offender registration. So that's obviously a big thing that we want to accomplish if we can. And a lot of the victims want to have that to hold that person accountable and to try to make sure that they don't do it to someone else.
What do you see as the impact on child victims?
Well, typically the person is known to the child. The stranger cases are very, very rare. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it can be a parent or grandparent or a sibling that is the perpetrator. And it's really hard for the child because they don't have another parent or grandparent or sibling. So even though they've been victimized by that person, they still see that as their parent. That's the only father or mother that they have. And a lot of times they don't want to lose that relationship, but they do.
What are some of the common misconceptions that you think the public has about child sex abuse cases?
Well, I think that, like we just touched on, there's not a lot of cases where it's a complete unknown stranger. It's usually either a parent, step-parent, mom or dad's boyfriend or friend, and unfortunately sometimes a sibling. So we want the public to be aware of that and to be on the lookout for possible grooming situations. You know, the child is not at fault here. We always want the child to know that they didn't do anything wrong. And it's up to us adults to be on the lookout for potential situations that are grooming or just an unfamiliar, something that doesn't seem right, if that's the case. And these perpetrators come from all walks of life. They can be, like I said, the parents. They can also be possibly teachers or pastors, coaches. And it's up to the adults to protect the children. So if they see something like that, we want them to feel comfortable reporting.